Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. Beneath the moss, beneath the pine needles and fallen leaves, there is a world without sunlight, without eyes, without sound. And yet it listens, it remembers, it connects. This world is made of threads, thin as hair, soft as whispers, and strong as memory. These threads are the mycelium, the hidden roots of fungi. They stretch through soil like thoughts across a quiet mind, touching tree roots, wrapping around rocks, and weaving a silent web through the earth. You walk above it every day and never know it's there, but it knows you, it knows everything that touches the ground. Imagine a forest not as a collection of trees, but as one single living being, connected by a secret intelligence below your feet. This is the work of mycelium. It doesn't have a brain, yet it solves problems. It doesn't have nerves, yet it senses. When a tree is thirsty, the mycelium can help. When one is dying, it can send warnings. In the language of chemistry and time, it passes signals that move not like light, but like dreams, slow, deep, and sure. Some call it the wood wide web, others call it the Earth's nervous system, but really it's something older and simpler than either. It is a whispering root. The roots of a birch can speak to the roots of a fir, not with voices, but with sugars and enzymes. Through mycelium, one tree can send food to another. A mother tree, ancient and wide, might give carbon to her saplings far away. A dying stump can stay alive, barely, fed by nearby trees through fungal threads. The forest is not a place of competition, as we once thought. It is a place of deep mutual care, and the mycelium is the gentle hand that holds it all together. Scientists used to think fungi were just decomposers, cleaning up the messes of life. But they are architects too, builders of connection. Their threads, called hyphae, form a network so vast a single gram of soil can contain up to 10 kilometers of fungal line. That's like finding a hidden city in a teaspoon. And in this city, there are highways and crossroads. When nutrients flow, they don't just wander, they are guided, sent with purpose, shared like letters between friends. And though this guidance is slow, it is not thoughtless. In experiments, fungi have been shown to reroute around obstacles, to seek food sources, even to choose the most efficient paths. How does something without a brain make choices? Perhaps not in the way we think of choice. But perhaps intelligence does not need a skull to live in. Perhaps it can live in the quiet between roots, in the tug of molecules and the bend of a hyphae. Perhaps thinking can be slow and soft and invisible. And perhaps the earth has been thinking all along, just not in words. The forest floor is never still, ants scurry, leaves fall, moisture gathers and dries. But beneath all this movement, the mycelium stays connected. It moves in the rhythms of growth and retreat. It senses light without seeing and touch without skin. Some hyphae grow toward phosphorus, others stretch toward tree roots, and when they find what they seek, they do not simply take, they trade. A fungus might give a tree rare minerals in exchange for sugars. These are ancient agreements written in cells instead of contracts, and they have worked for millions of years. If you could shrink down to the size of a rootlet and slide into the soil, you would see something beautiful. Glowing threads curling through the dark, brushing past worm tunnels and crystal grains. You would see the architecture of life, not straight lines and metal beams, but curved softness, always adapting. You might see fungi forming bridges between trees, sending silent messages, ferrying nutrients from rich to poor. You would see compassion, not in the way animals show it, but in the way the earth shows it, slow, hidden, and constant. In one forest in Oregon, there is a mycelial mat that stretches for nearly 4 square miles. It is estimated to be thousands of years old. It is one organism, vast and ancient, touching the roots of hundreds of trees. When you walk there, you walk on living memory. You walk on something that has felt the rise and fall of empires, the birth of cities, the changes in air and rain and soil. It has no face, no voice, but it has endured. It is patient, it is wise. And even in places where no trees grow, fungi still weave their stories. In deserts, in caves, under glaciers, fungal threads explore the edges of what life can survive. They form alliances with algae to make lichens. They eat rock. They wait, sometimes for decades, until the rain returns. This patience is not just survival, it is a kind of listening, a way of knowing the world not through conquest, but through care. Fungi teach us that intelligence does not need speed, it needs relationship, it needs quiet. The next time you walk through a forest, stop and kneel. Brush aside the leaves, look closely at the soil. You may not see the threads, but they are there, beneath your fingertips. And even if you do not see them, you are a part of their world. Your footsteps press into their web. Your breath feeds the trees that feed them. You're not outside this intelligence, you're within it. Because we too are woven into the fungal net. From the yeast that makes our bread rise, to the antibiotics that save our lives, to the mushrooms that speak with our brains in ways we still don't understand, fungi are everywhere. They are inside us, around us, before us. And if you listen quietly, if you let go of words and wait for something slower than thought, you might feel them listening back. Let's drift deeper into the mindless wisdom of the forest floor. Here, the mycelium doesn't sleep. It expands with purpose and listens through chemistry. When one tree is attacked by pests, it sends out a cry, not in sound, but in molecules released into the soil. The mycelium receives this signal and carries it across the forest, a biological telegram moving slowly from root to root. Other trees, still untouched, begin to prepare. They thicken their bark, they release bitter compounds into their leaves, they ready themselves. How does the mycelium know what to pass on? How does it distinguish harm from help? These are questions still unanswered, but the evidence speaks. Fungi are not simply bystanders. They are messengers. They are guardians of the unseen. Fungi also act as architects of balance. When a tree becomes too large or too old, its life starts to wane. But instead of simply falling into decay, it becomes part of the cycle. Fungi step in, not to destroy, but to transform. Their enzymes break down the hard wood, the bark, the dead roots. They return the carbon to the soil, the nitrogen to the network. Nothing is wasted. Even in death, the tree feeds the life around it. This is not a tragedy. It is a soft continuity, and the mycelium is the composer of this symphony of return. Imagine a classroom made not of walls and desks, but of roots and rot and regeneration. In this classroom, the teachers have no mouths, and the lessons are slow, but they are real. Fungi teach us how to live together without speaking, how to share without asking, how to wait without giving up. They teach that intelligence can be shared, spread out across 1,000 filaments, not held tightly in a single head. When scientists inject radioactive carbon into one tree, they can trace it hours later, flowing into another far away. It didn't move through the air, it didn't travel by stream, it flowed through the fungi. And fungi don't just help trees, they help each other. Some species of fungi are known to connect with other fungi underground, forming mycomycelial networks. Imagine not just a single web, but a city of webs, layered and interlocked, sharing data in the form of ions and sugars and tiny electrical pulses. These connections are alive. They shift and flex based on season, weather, need. They grow where they are most useful. They shrink where resources are thin. This is adaptation, not from instinct, but from interaction. In this living underground, direction is not given. It is discovered. And every decision, every stretch of hypha, every curl around a stone is shaped by the shape of the world itself. The environment gives the cue, and the fungi respond. This is not control, this is communion. Think of the language of mycelium as music. Not the sharp notes of a violin, but the deep hum of a cello, resonating through the ground. Slow signals, silent to us, echoing from one root to another. These signals can trigger the opening of plant pores, the release of oils, the calling of insect allies. And in this exchange, the forest becomes more than trees and soil. It becomes a single responsive body, alive with feedback, coordination, and memory. There are fungi that glow, bioluminescent threads that light the forest floor with soft green pulses. No one is quite sure why they glow, maybe to attract insects, maybe to communicate, maybe simply because that is how they are. These glowing threads remind us, life doesn't always need a reason to be beautiful. Sometimes it just is. And there are fungi that lie dormant for decades waiting for fire. Only after the heat cracks open the soil do they awaken. They sprout quickly, feast on the charred remains, and make way for new life. This is not destruction, it is renewal. Fungi understand what we often forget, that endings are just softened beginnings. In the human world, we measure intelligence in tests and tools, but fungi ask us to widen our definition. They show that responsiveness can be thoughtful, that problem-solving can be slow, that awareness can be diffused like mist and still be meaningful. A slime mold, a cousin of fungi, once solved a maze to find food, faster than some computer algorithms. It left behind a map of its path in chemical trails. It remembered not with neurons, but with touch. This too is a form of knowing. Across the earth, there are fungi that digest oil spills, clean toxic waste, filter water. They do this without orders, without instruction. They simply respond to what is present. And in that response is something powerful, the ability to heal, not dramatically, not quickly, but gently, patiently from the ground up. Many medicines come from fungi. Penicillin, from a mold that once spoiled bread, changed the course of human history. Statins, used to lower cholesterol, are fungal gifts. Even psilocybin, the compound in psychedelic mushrooms, is being studied for its ability to open the mind, to ease depression, to soften trauma. It's as if the fungi have always known how to help us, and we are only just beginning to listen. They do not shout, they do not move quickly, but they endure, they create, they remember. In forests and cracks of city sidewalks, in ancient tombs and space stations, fungi continue to appear, always quiet, always curious, always ready. And so, the next time you see a mushroom pushing through the dirt, know that it is not alone. It is just the fruit, the visible tip, of a vast hidden intelligence. Like the apple on a tree, it tells only a fraction of the story. Beneath it, the threads reach and learn and connect, and through those threads, the world listens. We are only at the beginning of understanding how deep that listening goes. But the fungi already know. They've known for millions of years. Now imagine time passing, not in years or centuries, but in the soft erosion of stones, in the slow breath of soil, in the silent unravelling of wood beneath rain. In that deep time, fungi are never in a hurry. They wait, and in waiting, they transform. They do not need to hurry because their work is endless. A fallen log becomes a bridge, then it becomes a feast, then it becomes the ground. Fungi are the sculptors of this invisible art, turning what was into what will be, with no audience and no applause. Even in the coldest months, when snow lies thick and roots sleep beneath frost, the mycelium remembers its paths. It keeps to its roots, pulsing nutrients beneath the silence. And when spring returns, it is already awake, already growing, already feeding the new green that stretches upward. Fungi do not die in winter, they become quieter. Their work slows but does not stop. Their network breathes in seasons like lungs for the forest floor. In human life, we often measure value in visibility. We praise the things we can name, touch, and see. But the fungi remind us that the most essential parts of life are hidden. The strongest connections are unseen. The most intelligent systems may never speak. Mycelium teaches us the value of subtlety. It teaches us to pay attention to what moves under the surface, not just in nature, but in ourselves. Our own bodies carry fungi. In our guts, on our skin, deep in our tissues, fungal cells live alongside us, sometimes helping, sometimes challenging, always present. We are not separate from this kingdom. We are part of it. Every breath we take, every piece of fruit we eat, every walk through a damp forest path, we are touching their world, and they are shaping ours. Even our ancestors knew their power. In ancient times, mushrooms were seen as magical. Some cultures believed they were messages from the gods. Others used them in rituals, in healing, in stories passed down through firelight. Cave paintings in Spain show mushroom shapes more than 6,000 years old. Our connection to fungi is not new. It is older than writing, older than farming. It is buried in our bones, our blood, our breath. In recent years, science has begun to rediscover what ancient people already suspected, that fungi are not just important but essential. They regulate ecosystems, they make soil fertile, they decompose toxins, they shape the weather. Spores drift high into the sky, helping clouds to form. Raindrops fall where fungi have sent them. This is not myth, it is measurement, it is real. And in the lab, researchers grow fungi in petri dishes, in bioreactors, in new combinations. They study their ability to build materials stronger than concrete, to grow leather without animals, to replace plastic with biodegradable forms. The future may be built in part by fungal hands, quiet, patient, persistent. What we once called mould may soon become the very fabric of cities. But perhaps the most powerful lesson fungi offer is this: intelligence does not need to dominate. It does not need to rise above or outcompete. True intelligence may lie in the willingness to cooperate, to blend, to yield. Fungi thrive not because they fight, but because they connect, they make room, they make bridges. They do not need to be seen to change the world, they do it from underneath. As you lie in bed at night, surrounded by stillness, know that beneath the houses, the sidewalks, the fields and forests, there is a living map that continues to grow. It reaches even now, even as you sleep. It holds the memory of trees that fell before you were born. It carries the breath of animals long vanished. It links the past to the present, to the future, not in words, but in touch. And when we imagine intelligence, let us imagine this: not only the mind that solves puzzles, but the one that waits for the rain, the one that weaves with patience, the one that listens through the ground. In a world that moves fast, fungi invite us to slow down, to pay attention, to consider that growth is not always upward. Sometimes it moves inward, sometimes it spreads across the quiet places, and sometimes the most important connections we make are the ones no one else sees. So let the story end not with a bang, but with a root. Let it sink softly like hyphae into soil. Let it linger in the way spores linger on a breeze. And remember, the next time you walk beneath trees, something ancient walks with you, unseen and gentle. A mind without a brain, a voice without a sound, a presence older than time, still listening, still learning, still here. Before the first books were written, before any alphabet was carved into stone or painted onto bark, memory already had a keeper. It didn't sit in libraries or scrolls. It lived underground, quiet and unnoticed, among the roots and rot. Fungi, through their vast and ancient networks, have always remembered. Not in words, not in pictures, but in patterns, of sharing, of signalling, of returning nutrients where they are needed most. The forest remembers through fungi, and the memory is not of stories or names, but of relationships. Who fed whom, who shaded whom, who bloomed and who fell. If you return to the same patch of woods year after year, you may find mushrooms in the same places. Not because they are the same mushrooms, but because the memory of their fruiting lives in the mycelium below. That thread remembers the temperature, the rainfall, the nutrients in the soil. When the season returns and the signs are right, it brings forth new fruit. Each mushroom is like a note played by an invisible hand, repeating a melody written long ago in the soil. In this way, the forest sings its own history, softly, yearly, through spores and stems. Even fallen trees are not forgotten. Their shape may vanish, but what they offered remains. As the fungi break them down, their nutrients enter the network and travel. A tree that stood for 200 years may now be feeding seedlings across the forest. Its carbon, its minerals, its essence, it moves, it continues, and the fungi, like caretakers of the past, carry it forward. Death does not end the story, it simply turns the page. Scientists once believed memory lived only in brains, but fungi challenge this idea. They respond to past experience. In lab experiments, they can learn the location of food, avoid past obstacles, and even alter their growth based on previous encounters. When the same conditions appear again, their response is faster, more precise. This is not memory as we know it. But it is something close, a biological imprint of experience, a soft form of knowing. Imagine a forest after fire, charred bark, blackened leaves, ash falling like snow. To our eyes it is destruction, but to the fungi it is instruction. The fire speaks in heat and smoke, and the mycelium listens. Certain fungal species awaken only in these moments. They bloom after fire, not in spite of it. They stabilize the soil, release nutrients, prepare the ground for new roots. They do not forget what happened. They respond, and in that response there is remembrance. Fungi also carry the memory of symbiosis. A species of fungus may form partnerships with certain trees and ignore others. These preferences aren't random, they are shaped by history. If a fungus once received rich sugars from a particular root, it remembers. It grows toward that species again, not because it thinks, but because its very growth is shaped by past success. This is evolutionary memory, written in generations of response. In the deep shade of forests where light barely filters through, mushrooms still rise. They do not need the sun like plants do. They remember another way of living, one that listens to decay instead of light. They feed on yesterday's fallen branches and leaves, bringing them back into the present. Each fungal bloom is a quiet monument to what came before. They do not shout their memories. They simply grow with them. There are even fungi that can preserve the memories of toxins. They absorb heavy metals, chemicals, and pollutants, locking them away inside their tissues. Some species are used to clean damaged soils in a process called mycoremediation. They don't forget what they've taken in. They hold it safely, turning danger into silence. It's a kind of caretaking, a promise that what harmed the earth can also be softened, contained, forgiven. And so when you see a ring of mushrooms in the grass, a fairy ring they call it, it's not just a pretty circle, it's the mark of memory. That ring is the edge of a growing mycelial network, expanding outward year after year. The mushrooms bloom at the boundaries, but the centre holds the oldest parts, the memories of where it began. That circle is not magic, but it is ancient. It is geometry shaped by growth, by time, by quiet remembering. In the Arctic tundra, in the deepest caves, in forests untouched for centuries, fungi continue their quiet work. They do not forget. They hold on to water, to carbon, to stories made of molecules. They store energy until it is needed. They pass on messages between plants. They archive the life of a place not in sound or image, but in chemistry and structure. Their archives are not read, they are lived. When we walk through forests, we are walking through layers of memory. Each footstep presses into a world that remembers rainfalls, droughts, footsteps long gone. And though we may not notice, the fungi do. They adjust, they adapt, they respond. We are part of that memory too, whether we know it or not. Mushrooms, small and strange, are just the visible signposts. The real memory lies beneath. A mind without a face, a history without pages, a record kept in the dark, woven between root and stone. And when we bend down to pick a mushroom to observe its cap, its gills, its fragile stem, we are not holding a thing. We are touching a moment in an ancient line of remembering, a breath from below, a soft echo from the living earth. Let's drift deeper into the memory palace of the forest, this time not above, but below, where the real keepers of time reside. The mycelium doesn't write history, it weaves it. When a sapling grows in a sunlit clearing, it isn't just starting its own story. It's joining an old one. The mycelial threads around its roots are already full of past conversations. Nutrients once carried to its mother now shift toward it. Warnings once passed during storms are stored in the chemical patterns of the network. The forest doesn't forget, it simply changes the form of what it remembers. A mushroom that blooms after rain isn't new, it's the voice of something older speaking again. Scientists now believe that fungi, through their electrical impulses, may possess something close to a syntax, a rhythm of signals that could be likened to a vocabulary. Not language exactly, but patterns that shift in response to stimulus, adapting over time. Some researchers have recorded over 50 distinct signal patterns from fungi exposed to different conditions. These signals change with light, touch, hunger. It's as though the mycelium doesn't just react, it reflects. And in that reflection, something like memory emerges. In autumn, when trees drop their leaves, it might seem like an end. But to the fungi, it's a beginning. The litter becomes food, and that food becomes energy, and that energy becomes motion. Roots fed by fungal partners are stronger, more resilient. Some studies show that trees connected to mycorrhizal networks survive drought longer, grow taller, recover faster. And when those trees are lost, whether to lightning or chainsaws, the network remembers. It reroots, it regrows. The mycelium keeps a living map of who's gone and who remains. Fungi remember not just individual trees, but entire communities. They can maintain relationships across different species, favouring the ones that give the most in return. In this way, forests evolve with memory, not just genetic memory, but social memory held in threads of life. A young tree planted in an old forest does better than one planted alone. Why? Because it is welcomed into the fungal web. It inherits not just nutrients but knowledge, the shared memory of how to survive. This memory isn't fast. It's not sharp like a photograph or sudden like a thought. It's slow and soft, like the way moss remembers a stone's curve, like the way roots remember where water used to be. We are used to thinking of memory as instant recall, but fungi remind us that memory can be environmental, it can be relational, it can be patient. In some forests, researchers have cut down trees only to discover years later that their stumps are still alive, green under the bark, pulsing faintly. How? Because the fungal network still connects them. The living trees nearby are feeding them. The forest has not forgotten the fallen. It still holds them, still supports them, still sends tiny gifts of sugar and water to their roots. This is not sentiment. This is system. And yet, it feels like love. Memory in the fungal world is never isolated. It is communal. What one part experiences, others may benefit from. This is unlike the brains we know. In a brain, neurons fire in circuits locked inside a skull. But in a fungal network, memory flows through the forest itself, open, shared, passed from tree to tree through fungal threads. There is no center, no command, just constant remembering. And fungi remember more than just forests. In farmlands, they respond to planting patterns, to chemical shifts, to the rise and fall of human touch. When land is overused and stripped of life, fungal networks weaken. The soil forgets how to hold water. The plants forget how to grow without help, but if left alone, fungi return. They begin rebuilding the memory. They reweave the relationships. They heal not just the land, but the story it carries. Even cities have fungal memory. Spores drift through cracks in sidewalks, take hold in basements, live in the wet corners of forgotten walls. They remember moisture. They remember warmth. They remember the quiet spaces that people overlook. Urban fungi are not wild, but they are resilient. They are the keepers of decay and rebirth in concrete landscapes. And the spores themselves, so small they seem like dust, are memory in flight. Each one carries genetic instructions, environmental hints, survival maps. They drift on air currents, sometimes for miles, sometimes for years. When they land, they don't just grow, they listen. They wait. They read the signals of the soil, the moisture, the light, and when they sense the right cues, they bloom. That blooming is the return of something old sparked by the present. Fungal memory is not linear. It is circular. Decay leads to growth. Loss leads to nourishment. The end of one thing becomes the middle of another. The forest, through fungi, learns how to let go and how to hold on at the same time. It learns how to forgive its losses by turning them into soil. And in that forgiveness is a kind of wisdom, a truth deeper than reason. That life is not made of moments but of threads. That the past is never fully gone. It becomes part of the network. It lives on in the leaves, the bark, the fungi that cradle the roots. We humans often try to preserve memory through monuments, through books, through screens. But fungi do something simpler. They preserve memory by feeding the present, by nurturing the now with what came before, by turning experience into nourishment. The forest remembers in this way, not by storing information in a fixed place, but by allowing it to flow, by letting each part of itself carry a little of the whole. And so when the wind moves through the trees, when the rain darkens the ground, when the mushrooms rise from the soil, it is all memory made visible again, quiet, gentle, alive. Now let us follow that memory to its softest edge, where fungi meet not just soil and trees, but us. Human beings are woven into this network too, though we rarely notice. Every time we dig into the earth, we disturb a thread. Every time we walk through a forest, we press gently onto a net of living memory. Our presence is recorded, not in ink or stone, but in the chemistry of the ground. Fungi notice. They respond quietly, adjusting their growth, shifting their signals. They have always done this, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because to fungi, memory is not about control, it is about continuation. And now we begin to listen. Mycologists, those who study fungi, have only scratched the surface of what these organisms remember. The more we study them, the more we find their lives shaped by past experience. In the lab, a mycelial colony will often grow faster toward a nutrient it has tasted before. If exposed to salt, it may pause, then slowly adapt, remembering the stress. Even without neurons, It behaves like a system that learns, not through symbols or language, but through touch, repetition, and time. In our bodies, the memory of fungi lives on too. Our ancestors lived in deep relationship with mushrooms, some nourishing, some dangerous, some strange. Healers learned which ones soothed fevers, eased pain, or softened the edge of death. In many cultures, mushrooms were more than medicine. They were bridges to spirit, to dreams, to ancestral memory. Even now, certain mushrooms are studied for how they reconnect parts of the human brain damaged by trauma or disease. In guided therapies, psilocybin has been shown to ease depression, dissolve fear, and help people remember not what happened, but how to be whole again. It is not just physical memory fungi touch, but emotional memory too. Their presence can comfort, remind, even restore. A field of tiny mushrooms after rain, a soft bloom on a fallen log, a glowing cap in a shadowed corner. These are not loud signs. They are gentle invitations. Remember, they seem to say, you are part of something older than your pain. In ancient forests, the deepest fungal networks persist for centuries. When trees grow in the same spot for hundreds of years, the fungi beneath form a lineage of memory, shaping the health and behavior of everything around them. New saplings born into this space grow faster, connect more easily, and survive longer. They are welcomed not just by soil, but by knowledge passed through fungal threads. In these places, the ground itself holds history. Not of war or kings or borders, but of wind and shade, of storm and stillness, of roots that once reached deep. We are used to thinking of memory as something inside us, but fungi show us that memory can be held between things, between tree and soil, between water and stone, between now and then. It doesn't need a face to be real. It doesn't need a voice to be heard. Some researchers are now trying to grow living computer systems from mycelium, circuits made of fungal threads that can process data, adapt to use, remember previous inputs. These are not science fiction dreams. They are experiments happening today. The fungi, it seems, are already good at computation. They solve mazes, they build networks, they make decisions, and they remember. Not like a human, but like a Varroas, slowly, deeply, completely. And perhaps the most important memory they carry is this: how to endure. In climates too dry, they wait. In soil too poor, they retreat. In darkness, they hold still. And when the time is right, they return. They send out hyphae, they reach again, they begin again, always with care, always with humility. Their memory is not a burden, it is a guide. So when you see a mushroom, do not think of it as an object, think of it as an offering. A small part of a story still unfolding, a memory made visible. Beneath it lies a network that has remembered storms and fires, roots and rain, footsteps and silence, and still it grows. The forests we love today are shaped by this memory. Their strength is not only in trunks and leaves, but in what connects them underneath. The kindness of an old tree feeding a young one, the echo of a long-dead stump kept alive through care, the patient transfer of minerals from past to present. This is the memory that fungi keep. And in the end, they will hold our memories too. When our bodies return to the earth, when our names are forgotten, the fungi will remain. They will turn our bones to nutrients. They will carry our atoms into roots, into leaves, into wind. And in doing so, they will remember us, not with words, but with life. This is the quiet promise of fungi. Nothing is lost. Everything becomes part of something else. The forest never forgets, because the fungi remember. Not in sharp images, not in perfect recall, but in the soft, faithful act of keeping the story going. So let this story end not with a period, but with a sprouting cap. Let it begin again, somewhere beneath your feet, in the soil's hush. Let it remind you that memory does not belong to humans alone. The earth remembers too, through threads, through time, through fungi. Beneath every forest, meadow, garden, and even beneath the cracks in city pavement, there is a quiet web of life. It doesn't shine or rustle or sing, it doesn't rise up to be seen, but it is there, always, threading through soil like veins in the earth's skin. These threads are mycelium, the underground part of fungi, and they are older than us, older than trees, older than bones. They stretch for miles in all directions, wrapping gently around roots, whispering through stones, connecting life to life to life. To the human eye, they are nearly invisible, wispy, fragile. But when seen up close, they look like lace spun by the earth itself. Delicate yet unbreakable, a tangle of tiny branching lines that weave together in patterns so complex. No two places on earth are exactly alike. These are not just roots, they are relationships. They are highways of sharing, systems of support, messengers of warning and health. The threads beneath us are not silent. They are speaking in chemistry, in pulses, in nutrients passed from one life form to another. Imagine standing barefoot in a forest. The soft ground presses back with a slight bounce, a quiet give. That bounce is the forest's breath. That softness is its memory. Beneath your feet, hundreds of miles of mycelial threads are alive, stretching between trees and shrubs, grasses and fungi, stones and roots. A single cubic inch of forest soil can hold hundreds of yards of fungal threads. They carry information, food and signals, and they do it constantly, without a brain, without a command, with no need to be seen. Fungi don't work alone, they partner. They braid themselves into the roots of plants in a bond so close that the two cannot be pulled apart. This bond is called mycorrhiza, from the Greek for fungus and root. It is one of the most successful collaborations in all of evolution. The fungus brings water, phosphorus, nitrogen. The plant gives back sugars made from sunlight. Both thrive more than they could alone. It is a relationship so ancient it helped plants move from water to land. Without fungi, the green world we know might never have grown. And this network does more than feed. It listens. When a tree is attacked by insects or disease, it sends chemical messages down into its roots. The mycelium picks up the alarm and carries it to neighbouring trees. Those trees, in turn, prepare. They release protective chemicals. They adjust their growth. They adapt, not randomly, but as if warned. And they are. The network told them. The invisible threads beneath them spoke. It's easy to forget this world exists. We walk above it every day. We plant gardens, build cities, harvest fields, and yet we rarely think about the life below. But this life is what holds everything together. Soil is not just dirt, it is alive, with bacteria, fungi, and billions of tiny creatures all working in quiet choreography. Fungi are the stage, the curtain, and sometimes the dancers. They shape the stage beneath us and decide what can grow, how fast and for how long. Some fungi reach upward in the form of mushrooms, brief flashes of fruit that last a day or two, but most remain unseen, unfelt. Yet even in this hidden state they shape the earth. They break down fallen leaves and wood, turning them into rich soil. They pull metals from rocks and feed them to trees. They knit soil together so that rain doesn't wash it away. They hold the ground in place, they cradle it. They remember how to keep it whole. In deserts, their threads lie dormant, waiting for rare rain. In jungles, they tangle with roots in wet shadows. In tundra, they curl between ice crystals. No matter the place, fungi are there, connecting. They are not conquerors, they are connectors, and in their quiet way they create stability. They create home. There are places in the world where a single fungal network stretches for hundreds of acres. One in Oregon is considered among the largest living organisms on Earth, covering nearly 4 square miles. It is ancient, thousands of years old, and still alive, still reaching, still responding to every season, every root, every drop of moisture. When you walk there, you are not walking on land. You are walking on a living intelligence, one that has seen more sunrises than we can imagine. And yet even in its vastness, it remains humble. It does not rise above the soil. It does not claim space. It gives, it shares, it holds. Its strength is in what it supports, not what it demands. It teaches that power does not need to be loud, that intelligence can be hidden and still real, that connection, even when invisible, is what sustains life. We can't see the threads beneath us with our eyes, but we can feel their effects. A thriving forest, a blooming meadow, a garden that feels full of life. These are signs of a strong underground network, signs that the invisible web is whole. And when we disturb it, when we dig too deep, clear too much, poison the soil, the effects ripple, plants weaken, water drains too fast, the land forgets how to hold itself. Fungi are the quiet caretakers of this balance. They are not heroes, they are not villains, they are simply present, always doing what they've done for millions of years. They are the threads beneath us, and without them the world would unravel. So next time your feet touch the ground, pause. Feel the weight of your body pressing into the soil. Know that beneath you, something ancient and kind is holding you up, not with strength but with connection, not with speed but with patience, not with noise but with presence. The threads beneath us are not lost, they are just waiting to be remembered. Let's follow those threads further, not just through forests and fields but into the heart of how life connects. Mycelium doesn't simply grow, it learns. It bends toward nutrients, reroutes around obstacles, avoids toxins. Its growth is not random but responsive, shaped by everything it touches. When you disturb one part of the web, the rest adjusts. This is not memory in the way we know it. It is adaptation born from experience, a form of wisdom built into the fabric of life. And this wisdom spreads. Mycorrhizal fungi don't just serve one tree, they link many. A single fungal network can connect dozens, even hundreds of plants together, forming a community where resources move according to need. A tall tree with extra sugar might send it down to the fungi, which pass it along to a shaded sapling struggling to survive. This redistribution doesn't follow laws or commands. It flows naturally, like breath in a sleeping body. It is the ecosystem caring for itself. Scientists call this a common mycorrhizal network. But to think of it only as a scientific term misses its quiet beauty. It's not just a system, it's a shared existence, a forest choosing, moment by moment, to stay whole. The mycelium facilitates this unity, but it does not control it. It listens, it responds, it helps life move toward balance. When something shifts, a drought, a flood, an insect invasion, the network adjusts, trees warn each other, roots tighten their grip, growth slows or surges. The forest does not panic, it recalibrates through fungi. And this web doesn't only connect plants of the same species. Pine and birch, oak and maple, grasses and herbs, all can be part of the same fungal lattice. They speak different biological languages, but the fungi translate. One species may share phosphorus, another may send carbon, a third may request nitrogen. And the fungi, without hierarchy or ownership, move these gifts where they are most needed. This is not generosity in the human sense. It is interdependence made visible through action. Even fungi that don't form mycorrhiza play vital roles. Saprotrophic fungi break down dead wood and fallen leaves. Their enzymes unlock nutrients trapped in tough fibers, releasing them back into the soil. Without them, forests would drown in their own debris, the air would sour with rot, but instead, decomposition becomes rebirth. Life folds back into itself and the total cycle begins again. The threads beneath us do not fear death. They turn it into nourishment. There are fungi that live in partnership with bacteria, forming layered colonies that move like rivers under the microscope. Others shape the pH of the soil, making it more welcoming to new life. Some trap tiny worms and digest them, releasing nutrients where plants need them most. These are acts of precision, not chance. Each thread is part of a larger pattern, responding to signals both local and distant. The network is not static, it is alive, always adjusting, always evolving. In cities, the network struggles but still survives. Beneath parks and sidewalks, in the thin soil clinging to tree roots on the street, fungal threads continue to grow. We build walls and roads and buildings, and still they persist, finding cracks, seeking moisture, reweaving around our footprints. They do not need wilderness to do their work. They simply need time, space, a little undisturbed ground in which to remember. When humans treat land with care, planting trees, enriching soil, avoiding harmful chemicals, the fungal network strengthens. It grows back faster than we expect. It reconnects. It remembers. Studies have shown that when damaged ecosystems are left alone, fungi are among the first to return. They do not rebuild the past. They help shape a new version of it, one better suited to the present moment. Their intelligence is not nostalgia, it is resilience. And their structure, so delicate, so complex, is built to last. Mycelium threads can pass through rock, water, and even fire. Some species survive being frozen for years, only to regrow when warmth returns. Others lie dormant in drought, waiting decades for the rain. They are not in a hurry. Their clocks run by the rhythms of the earth, not the ticking of machines. They remind us that speed is not the same as progress, that survival comes not from domination, but from listening. And they teach us something else, too, that no life is separate. What grows in one part of the forest depends on what happens in another. A tree nourished by rich fungal connections may someday send food to a struggling neighbour. A plant rooted in weak soil may benefit from the nutrients passed from far away. The network ensures that what is healthy supports what is healing, that no part is left alone. In this way, the threads beneath us are not just biological structures, they are teachers of balance, of reciprocity, of quiet strength. We often look upward for wisdom, to stars, to gods, to thoughts, but maybe it lives below us too, in the soft persistence of fungi, in their willingness to hold the living and the dying in the same embrace. When we walk through a thriving field or forest, we feel peace. Perhaps this is why. The ground beneath us is whole. It is not a surface. It is a system, a conversation, a cradle, and that feeling of calm, of life in harmony, comes not just from the air or light or breeze, but from the invisible web holding everything together. We are not above this web. We are within it. Our bodies contain fungal cells. Our breath feeds plants that feed the fungi. Our footsteps press into the net, leaving signals behind. The fungi respond, always gently, always quietly, always completely. And so, when we wonder how to live in balance, we might look down. We might ask the earth, not with words, but with care, with attention, with humility. The answer is already written in the threads. Let us return now to those threads, gently, reverently, because they are not just biological wonders, but a way of seeing the world. The mycelial network beneath our feet reminds us that everything is connected, not only in space, but through time. The soil remembers rain, the roots remember wind, and the fungi, without sight or speech, remember every interaction that passed through their filaments. They do not archive facts, they hold relationships. In every place they grow, fungi create maps, not with ink, but with growth. Their threads curl around rocks, sense the shape of wood, avoid toxins, find minerals. They build these paths based on memory, on what worked before, on how life responded. These maps are living. They change with every drop of water, every fallen leaf, every tremble of a passing foot. And as they change, they shape everything that grows above. The forest above is not separate from the web below. They are mirror images, one seen, one hidden. When we marvel at the branching of a tree, we are also looking at a reflection of its underground partner. For every limb that stretches into the sky, roots stretch down, woven through with fungi that carry not only water, but the legacy of every tree that came before. Fungi are the archive keepers of the land, not through records, but through function. Every nutrient passed, every signal shared, every adaptation made, it stays in the network. We are part of that archive too. Our bodies are made of atoms that passed through fungal threads long before we were born. The food we eat, the air we breathe, the medicine we take, all touched by fungi somewhere along the line. Even after we're gone, our bodies will return to the soil, and the fungi will welcome us, turn us into something new, something still part of life. There is no waste in their world. There is only transformation. And perhaps that is the truest intelligence of fungi, not the way they problem solve or communicate, but the way they accept change. Where other organisms resist decay, fungi embrace it. Where others cling to form, they soften into new shapes. They do not fear loss. They turn it into beginning. This is not weakness. It is wisdom. A wisdom that says, the end of one thing is never the end. It is only a fold in the fabric, only a turning. Even in our technology, fungi are starting to show the way forward. Researchers are learning to grow biodegradable packaging from fungal matter. Bricks made of mycelium are being used to build structures that are strong, insulating and alive. Clothing, leather and even circuit boards, once made with plastic or animal products, can now be made with fungi. And in all of this, the material is not static. It continues to breathe, to shift, to hold memory. It behaves like what it came from, a living system. The promise of fungi is not just in what they can become, but in how they become. Slowly, gently, in response to their environment, always adapting, never dominating. If we listen closely, we may learn to do the same. To build not against nature, but with it. To connect rather than control. To grow not upward in isolation, but outward in community. There's a quiet lesson in how fungi share. They do not hoard. They do not keep more than they need. They pass resources along to where they are most needed. They feed the young and the old, the weak and the strong. They do not ask for praise, they do not seek recognition. They simply do what needs to be done, and in doing so make the whole system thrive. Imagine a world shaped by that philosophy. Cities with living walls and breathing bricks. Farms enriched by fungal networks instead of synthetic chemicals. Forests managed not by removing, but by listening. Human communities connected not only by wires and data, but by an ethic of mutual care, just like the web below. We are already part of this. We always have been. The fungi beneath us do not draw boundaries between species. They connect moss to pine, fern to cedar, insect to flower, and us too. We breathe in spores every day. We eat mushrooms. We carry yeast in our bellies and on our skin. Fungi are not other. They are us. They are part of the invisible fabric that holds life in place. So when we speak of intelligence, we must learn to see it in new ways. Not just in speed or complexity or awareness, but in presence, in humility, in the willingness to be shaped by others. Fungi do not impose their form on the world. They let the world shape them. They follow cracks in rocks. They trace the outlines of roots. They grow in harmony with what is. And so we return to the threads, not to study them like objects, but to join them, to remember that we are not separate, that our footsteps matter, that our choices ripple out through the web. Every act of care, every piece of waste, every garden we plant or tree we fell, enters the threadwork of life and changes it. We are not outside the system. We are part of it, held by it, responsible to it. The threads beneath us have always been there, quietly doing the work of connection. They don't need to be seen to be real. They don't need to be named to matter. They simply need space, respect, time, and if we give them that, they will continue. Holding the soil, feeding the trees, listening for what's needed, carrying the memory of what was and the hope of what could be. Let this story end like the threads themselves, not with finality, but with continuity. A slow, soft reaching, a quiet promise beneath your feet. The hidden network of life, still growing, still holding, still here. In the stillness between the trees, where the light filters down like dust and the air feels thick with the memory, something smaller than breath drifts unseen. It carries no wings, no eyes, no intention. And yet, it moves with purpose, riding on currents that bend around leaves and sweep through open sky. This is a spore, a seed of a fungus, a whisper of possibility. It floats, not in haste but in quiet trust, carried by wind, by water, by the fur of a passing fox or the shoe of a walking child. It doesn't choose where it goes, but it knows what to look for when it arrives. Spores are the beginning of everything fungi become. Smaller than dust, lighter than ash, they are scattered not by aim but by abundance. A single mushroom can release billions of them in a single night. If you walk through a forest after rain and tilt your head just right, you might catch the shimmer of them in the morning sun, a silver mist rising from the moss vanishing into the air. That shimmer is life, flung wide across the world in the hope that some small part of it will land where it can grow. Fungi do not send spores with certainty, they send them with faith. The faith that somewhere, sometime, there will be the right conditions, enough moisture, enough darkness. A crack in the bark, a wound in the soil, a piece of dead wood ready to be turned into life again. Most spores never find that place. They drift until they disappear, but a few, just enough, settle where they're needed. And from that invisible landing, something vast begins. There is something deeply poetic about how fungi spread. They don't chase opportunity. They wait for it. They don't force their way in. They search gently, almost passively, until the world opens. Then they grow, they send out threads, they begin the slow work of transformation, not loudly, not quickly, but completely. Spores are everywhere, in the air you breathe, on every surface you touch, in the water that falls from the sky. We don't see them, but we live among them. A single cubic meter of air can contain hundreds of thousands of fungal spores. They ride the wind like invisible seeds, drifting across oceans, rising into the upper atmosphere, falling with the snow, climbing with the mist. Some travel across continents, Others stay close, settling only a few feet from where they began, and yet each carries within it the full possibility of a new network. Some fungi have evolved elaborate ways to launch their spores into the air. Puffballs explode with a touch, sending clouds of spores into the breeze. Cup fungi build up pressure and fire their spores like tiny cannons. Others rely on insects, offering nectar or shelter in exchange for a ride. And some depend entirely on animals to carry their spores on fur, feathers, or feet. There are mushrooms that grow only after deer have walked through, because the spores cling to their hooves and drop where the soil has been stirred. Each method is different, but the principle is the same: spread wide, trust the wind, let the world decide where you belong. It is a soft strategy, one rooted in patience. Not all spores will thrive, but those that do will begin a new chapter in the fungal story, one that unfolds slowly, deeply, underground. The journey of a spore is not measured in distance alone, it is measured in change. A spore begins as a shell, a hard, protective coat wrapped around a tiny, dormant life. It can wait for years, even decades, before conditions are right. It waits through heat, through frost, through silence. And when the time is right, it cracks open. From that crack emerges the first thread of hyphae, a whisper of white reaching forward into the unknown. That first reach is everything. It is soft but determined. It tests the soil, tasting for nutrients, sensing for space. If the ground is rich, it grows. If not, it retreats, or dies, or waits again. This is not failure. It is learning. It is listening to the world and responding. Each thread that emerges from a spore is a question. Can I live here? And the earth answers, in time, in texture, in chemistry. Some spores land in unexpected places, in concrete cracks, in the corners of basements, on bread left out too long. They grow where they can, shaping themselves to the same space they find. They don't demand ideal conditions, they adapt. And in that adaptation is a kind of wisdom, one that accepts reality and still chooses to grow. And when two compatible spores land near each other, something new happens. They fuse, sharing their contents, creating a new, unified organism. This fusion is the beginning of a network, a new mycelial web ready to expand through the world. What began as a single floating cell becomes a system of sharing, of remembering, of supporting. The wind may carry spores apart, but it also brings them together. In some ecosystems, certain fungi release spores only at specific times, after a fire, after a rain, in the cool hush of evening. Their timing is not random. It is refined by millennia of listening. Fire-loving fungi, for instance, lie dormant for decades in the soil, their spores sealed tight. Only the heat of flame softens their coats. Only the charcoal-blackened earth tells them, now, and when they rise they do not mourn the loss above. They begin the healing below. Spores are not fragile, they are persistent. Some have been found preserved in ancient amber, still intact after millions of years. Others drift through space on dust particles, surviving the vacuum and radiation. They are nature's explorers, testing the edges of possibility, always ready, always waiting. We like to think of travel as movement with purpose, a journey with direction. But spores teach us that travel can also be trust. Trust in wind, in chance, in the quiet intelligence of the earth to guide them where they're needed most. They don't control their path, but they still arrive. And so, when you breathe in the scent of damp soil after rain, you are breathing the air of spores. When you walk through grass and feel something soft explode beneath your step, you are helping the forest begin again. When you see a mushroom in a forgotten corner, it is the visible sign of an invisible journey completed. A spore found its place, and now something new grows. This is the way of fungi. Quiet beginnings, small travellers, life born from almost nothing. And yet once begun, it changes everything. Let's drift with the spores now, not as scientists, but as silent companions, tracing their invisible paths across the sky. High above the forest canopy, where branches no longer reach, and only the wind decides direction, spores are riding currents like soft seeds of breath. They don't flap wings or steer themselves. They surrender. And in surrendering, they spread life farther than any step or root could ever reach. They become part of the air, and in that air, they become possibility. Many of these spores are launched with an exquisite sensitivity to timing. Some mushrooms wait until the humidity is perfect, when moisture in the air helps carry the spores gently and evenly. Others release at dusk when winds are low, and the coolness of night allows them to linger near the ground, increasing the chance they'll find soil. In this, fungi show their deep attunement to the rhythms of the world. They don't rush, they release when the earth is ready. In the tropical forests, spores ride the upward drafts created by the heat of day. As air rises through the trees, it lifts spores into the upper layers of the atmosphere, where they might travel hundreds of miles before settling again. In Arctic regions, where time is slow and life clings tightly to the brief warmth of summer, spores gather in the snowmelt, drifting with water rather than wind. Even in deserts where rain is rare, spores wait in dry crusts of soil, unbothered by the passing of years, holding their breath for a single drop. Spores are not only spread by wind and water, animals play an essential role. Insects crawl across gilled undersides of mushrooms, brushing against the powdery spore prints that cling like mist to their legs. Beetles carry spores into rotting wood. Birds gather fruiting bodies to line their nests, unknowingly spreading spores with every feathered movement. Even humans are part of the journey. Each time we walk through damp grass, each time we press a fingertip into the velvet cap of a mushroom and carry its powder on our skin, we become travellers alongside them. There are fungi whose spores need fire, whose life only begins in the ash. These species evolved in places where lightning sets forests ablaze and seasons return scorched. The fire clears the way, removing competition, releasing locked nutrients. Then the spores, long dormant in the soil, awaken. Their coats split open, their threads begin to grow. These fungi don't fear destruction. They remember how to turn it into beginning. Other spores require freezing and thawing to trigger growth. In alpine forests, they wait through snow and ice, only to bloom with spring's first melt. Some pass through the stomachs of animals and are fertilized by digestion itself. Fungi are endlessly adaptive. They don't resist the harshness of the world. They move with it. They turn challenge into doorway. A spore doesn't travel to escape. It travels to connect. Each one carries the genetic code of its parent, a story etched in proteins and sugars. But when it fuses with another spore, that story grows. The two merge, creating something new, something unpredictable. And from that fusion, a new mycelium begins to form, winding slowly through the dark, testing its path with every curl and reach. From this, a network is born. And from the network, a world. In human culture, we often see separation as necessary. Individuality, independence, direction. But spores show us a different truth. That connection is survival. That drifting doesn't mean lost. That to be carried is not weakness. It is a kind of wisdom. We see the fruiting bodies, the mushrooms, the molds, the cups and frills, and we imagine those as the life of the fungus. But they are only the exhale, the brief, visible whisper of something much larger. Spores are the inhale, the breath pulled back into the earth, the memory stored in a shell, the waiting. And inside that waiting is potential not just for one life, but for many. Because from one spore can come a network. From one landing can rise hundreds of miles of thread. And from that, other organisms thrive. Trees, moss, insects, animals, even us. Spores do not just travel, they prepare the ground for life itself. Imagine a forest slowly healing from drought. The trees are thin, the soil dry. Then the rains return and with them the spores bloom. Fungi awaken, feeding the roots, replenishing the nutrients, helping water stay in the soil. Within months, the forest begins to green again. The spores did not cause the rain, but they responded to it. And in their response, they helped life return. In the built world too, spores find their way. They grow in basements and windowsills, yes, but also in labs where scientists study their power. Fungal spores are used to clean oil spills, to create new medicines, to build sustainable materials. Their journey is not only ecological, it is personal, cultural, technological. They move through our history as quietly as they move through the wind. And yet, despite all we know, most spores will never be studied. They will float through the air unnoticed, land without ceremony, and either grow or not. Their journey is not about being seen. It is about offering the possibility of life wherever they go, whether in the corner of a fallen log, or deep beneath a forest floor, or even in the folds of a forgotten shoe. The spore waits, and in that waiting carries the soft future of fungi. We think of life beginning in noise, in birth, in bloom, in light. But spores remind us that life also begins in stillness, in the soft drift, in the unspoken promise that something small carried gently can change the world, that the smallest things, unnoticed and unseen, are often the ones that root deepest and hold strongest. This is what it means to travel as a spore does, to let go, to drift with trust, to land where the world needs you, and to begin again. Now imagine that you are a spore, weightless, silent, unseen. You are not pushed by will but carried by wind, drifting through space not of your choosing. There is no fear in this movement, only patience, only openness. The sky above you shifts in temperature, the air thins, the sunlight fades and returns. All the while you spin slowly, without destination, yet with quiet purpose. You carry inside you something ancient and essential, the blueprint of life that asks for nothing but a place to begin. Beneath you the world turns, mountains rise and fall in slow motion, forests stretch and shrink, rivers shift like veins across the skin of the earth. You do not resist any of it. You float above it all, held not by strength but by lightness. You are possibility, waiting for a place to land. And when at last the wind softens, when gravity begins its gentle pull, you fall. Not like a stone, like a thought. You settle into the curve of bark, into the dampness of soil, into the shelter of a hollow. The world around you is quiet but not empty. There are roots near you, stones, microorganisms drifting like dust in a tide pool. You rest. Not because you are tired, but because the moment to begin has not yet arrived. You wait through days, through cold, through dry spells. You wait until moisture reaches you, until the earth softens, and when it does, you open. No sound, no flash, just a small crack in your shell. Just a thread thinner than breath curling forward into the dark. From this thread comes more, each one testing, tasting, sensing, some extend, some retreat, some fuse. Slowly the world begins to respond. Nutrients are drawn from the soil. Connections are made with roots. Water trickles down and is held by the threads you grow. The small hollow where you landed becomes alive. What was once a spore becomes a network. And in time, when the network is strong enough, it speaks, not in language but in presence. You call to other fungi, to the roots above, to the creatures below. You become part of the web beneath the world. And then, when the season is right, when rain has fallen and the temperature holds steady, you send a message upward. A signal to grow. Above the ground, something stirs. A small shape begins to rise. A mushroom, your fruiting body. Soft, damp, firm. It pushes through the soil, through the moss, through the leaf litter. It does not shout its arrival. It simply appears like a poem written in flesh. Its cap spreads, its gills open, and from beneath that cap you send your own spores into the air. Billions of them, like you once were, like you still are. Each one drifting, waiting, becoming. This is the story of a spore, not just of travel, but of return, not just of waiting, but of witnessing. Because the journey of a spore is also the story of how life reclaims the forgotten. Spores land in burned forests and make soil again. They find dead wood and turn it to food for the next generation. They settle in abandoned places and build beauty where no one is looking. They show us that to drift is not to be lost, it is to be willing. To be part of something larger than a single will. Spores also carry resilience. They survive conditions that other forms of life cannot. High heat, intense cold, UV radiation, desiccation. They can sleep for decades and still remember how to grow. They are not fragile, they are forged in patience, in the art of arrival. They teach that softness is not weakness, that surrender is not defeat, that to wait without knowing is sometimes the greatest strength of all. Fungi have been sending spores through the air for over 1 billion years. Long before trees shaded the earth, before vertebrates walked on land, spores drifted. In that drifting, they connected ecosystems, they shaped evolution, they gave rise to partnerships that made plant life possible. Without spores, there would be no roots. Without roots, no forests. Without forests, no breath. And so, when we walk through the world today, we are walking in the aftermath of countless spore landings, of journeys completed in silence, of beginnings that bloomed without our noticing, that mushroom pushing up through the sidewalk crack, that mould blooming across forgotten bread, that soft fuzz rising from the floor of the forest. each one the end of a spore's story and the beginning of something else. In their own way, spores remind us that we too are carried by time, by choices, by the breath of those who came before us. We may not always see where we're going, but we carry the potential to begin again wherever we land. And in every act of reaching, every moment of waiting, something within us prepares to grow. Perhaps that is why we feel something when we see a mushroom bloom, some small stirring in the chest. It is not just beauty we're noticing, it is a mirror, a quiet echo of our own story told in smaller scale. Drift, wait, listen, bloom, let go. And in that letting go, the cycle begins again. Billions of spores rising like mist, vanishing into sky. Not all will survive, but some will find their place, some will land in shadow and wake in light, some will root, reach, and one day bloom, just like the one that started this story, just like the ones beneath your feet right now, because the world is full of travellers, not all of them with legs, not all of them with maps, but each one carried, each one called by the quiet wind that says, "It's time, begin." When a tree falls in the forest, it does not disappear. It does not vanish into silence. It begins again. Slowly, softly, the fallen trunk settles into the forest floor. Leaves gather on top of it. Rain seeps through its bark and moss clings to its sides. It seems at first like a kind of stillness, an ending. But underneath the surface, something quiet begins. The fungi arrive, not with sound, but with threads. They move into the crevices of bark, into the veins of xylem and phloem, into the heartwood. The wood, once rigid with life, begins to soften, not with decay, but with transformation. Fungi do not rush, they explore. Hyphae stretch out like invisible fingertips, sensing what is present, where moisture clings, where sugars remain. They are the first responders to the wood's collapse. Not to mourn, but to reorganize. Their enzymes break the lignin and cellulose that once made the tree stand tall. They take what was locked in structure and set it free. Carbon, nitrogen, memory, all return to the soil where it will feed the next generation. This is not destruction. This is digestion. A kind of forest alchemy. The dead tree becomes food for beetles, for ants, for mosses and ferns. It becomes shelter for foxes, a highway for fungi, a cradle for seedlings. Its branches, once lifted skyward, now hold rain in small pools that nourish birds and salamanders. It is still giving. It is still part of life. The fungi that begin this process are not flashy. They don't always fruit in brilliant colours or strange shapes. Some grow in thin, almost translucent layers under the bark. Others live inside the wood, unseen. But their work is steady, their threads move like breath, expanding, contracting, wrapping around the cells of the tree. They don't see the trunk as dead, they see it as open, as ready. This readiness is the secret of the forest. Nothing is ever truly over. A fallen tree becomes what the forest needs. Sometimes it is a nurse log, hosting tiny new trees that root into its softening wood. Sometimes it is a passage, allowing fungi to stretch from one side of the forest to the other. And sometimes it is simply rest, a long sigh of the forest taking its time to remember. Fungi are the artists of this memory. Each species specializes in different tasks. Some break down cellulose, the fibrous structure that gives trees their strength. Others target lignin, the tough waterproof glue that holds wood together. Still others feed on the tiny molecules left behind by bacteria and insects. It is a layered process. Delicate, precise, and slow. But in time, what was once solid becomes soil. What once shaded the canopy now feeds the roots below. And in this process, the fungi do not work alone. They collaborate with beetles who carry their spores, with bacteria who loosen the fibers, with insects who tunnel through the bark, opening paths. It is a quiet community of change, moving without commands or plans. Each step is guided by need, by presence, by what is ready to be given. In tropical forests, decay happens quickly. The warmth and moisture invite fungi to bloom rapidly, covering wood in bright fans and lace-like mats. In colder climates, the process takes years, even decades. But it still happens. The wood sleeps, and the fungi watch over it. They do not disturb. They wait until the time is right, until the snow melts, until the bark splits, until the first thread can enter. To watch a fallen tree decompose is to witness time in slow motion. Each season brings a change. The bark loosens, the mushrooms rise, the ants carve tunnels, the moss thickens. And beneath it all, the wood becomes less of itself and more of the forest. The line between tree and ground blurs. Life and death entwine. Some trees, even after falling, continue to live. If their roots still touch the ground, if the fungal networks are intact, nearby trees may send them sugars. These logs may bloom with leaves for years, horizontal but alive, and even when that life fades, the memory remains. Fungi carry it forward, taking the molecules that held one tree and offering them to another. This generosity is not sentimental, it is ecological. It is the way the forest stays whole. Nothing is hoarded, nothing is lost. A log that once held the weight of birds and the dance of wind now holds seedlings and soil. It holds fungi that will one day fruit, releasing spores that drift and land and begin again. And in every stage of this transition, there is beauty. The colours of rot, deep purples, soft blues, the orange of rusting wood, are not signs of decay but of richness. The smell of decomposing wood is not foul but earthy, grounding, alive. It carries the scent of transformation, of molecules returning home. Some of the most important fungi in this process are polypores, shelf-like mushrooms that grow from the sides of logs like steps to an invisible world. Others are crust fungi, forming thin, smooth layers that coat the surface like skin. And some are jelly fungi, translucent and strange, trembling with moisture. Each one plays a part, each one is part of the forest's breath. To sit beside a fallen log is to sit beside a living system, not one of motion, but of presence. The fungi moving inside are as alive as the animals in the canopy. They speak a slower language, one of enzymes and touch, but they are speaking even now, even in silence. The next time you see a fallen tree, do not step over it as if it is gone. Sit beside it. Place your hand on its softened bark, feel the dampness, the texture. Know that beneath your palm threads are moving, turning yesterday into tomorrow, turning form into foundation. Because the wood that sleeps is not lost. It is being rewritten. It is becoming part of the forest's future, held gently by fungi that know how to carry the past. Let us follow deeper into the wood that sleeps and the fungi that work like soft-handed sculptors beneath its bark. As the years pass, the log changes, not suddenly, but slowly, with each breath of rain, each crumble of bark, each soft push of hyphae, into its grain. The process is not decay in the way we often fear it. It is more like memory being unspooled, strand by strand, so that nothing is wasted. The fungi do not rush. They do not demand. They simply listen to the log's readiness and begin where it is softest. Inside the log, the wood is no longer rigid. It has loosened. Light now enters through cracks. Tiny roots weave through the soft spots. The texture of the tree changes from strength to sponge, from wall to invitation. And the fungi, those patient, unseen caretakers, continue their work. They move in every direction. They connect patches of decomposition like brush strokes on a canvas. They know exactly where the nutrients lie, where the moisture pools, where life can begin again. They do not need eyes to see this. They sense it with their cells. In this dark, quiet chamber, the fungi transform wood into life. They feed springtails, mites, beetle larvae. They prepare the soil that will hold the next generation of roots. They even help to regulate the balance of gases in the forest, breaking down carbon-bound compounds and releasing them in gentle exhales. They do not hoard what they decompose, they redistribute it. They offer it to the roots of nearby saplings, to the mosses above, to the birds nesting in the hollows. What was once tree becomes everything. The forest relies on this process. Without fungi, fallen wood would linger for centuries, locked in its own past. It would not feed, it would not change, it would become burden instead of offering. But the fungi make sure that never happens. They turn endings into beginnings, not with fire or force, but with enzymes, patience and touch. The forest is their home, but also their canvas, and their paint is time. In some forests, you can see stages of this transformation laid out like a timeline. A freshly fallen tree still wears its leaves. Next to it, a log stripped of bark, its inside softening. Nearby, a sunken body of wood, now home to saplings and ferns. And finally, a shadow of what was once trunk, just rich soil, holding footprints, holding rain, ready for more. This is not death. This is recycling in the truest, oldest sense. A story told in texture, in colour, in smell. White rot fungi specialise in breaking down lignin, the tough material that gives wood its strength and resistance. These fungi leave behind pale, fibrous remains. Soft rot fungi, in contrast, work more slowly, often in the presence of moisture, leaving behind a sponge-like interior that holds water for future life. Brown rot fungi consume cellulose and hemicellulose, leaving behind dark, brittle wood that cracks in cubical patterns. Each type of rot tells a different story. Each is a necessary chapter in the log's return to the earth. And fungi don't just decompose, they protect. Some secrete chemicals that deter insects or microbes that would unbalance the process. Others form partnerships with the log's inhabitants, providing food in exchange for movement, for spore dispersal, for access to untouched wood. These relationships are not planned, but they are intentional. A balance shaped by countless seasons, by tiny negotiations written in molecules and mycelium. Even the structure of a log is changed by fungi in subtle, intelligent ways. As the wood softens, its shape creates hollows and pockets. Water gathers here, seeds drop and germinate, small mammals find shelter. Salamanders rest in the cool, damp grooves. The fungi do not plan this, but their work makes it possible. In this way, decomposition becomes design. A log is not merely dissolving, it is evolving into habitat, into bridge, into beginning. Children of the forest, young trees, often begin their lives in this softened wood. A rotting log may hold more nutrients, more moisture, and more fungal partners than the bare ground. Its softened structure lets roots take hold more easily. Its decomposed fibres feed the roots. Its fungal network connects the sapling to the wider forest. A tree that begins in the body of another grows strong, not in spite of what came before, but because of it. The past literally feeds the future. Even humans have learned from this. In traditional forest gardens, logs are left to decompose among crops, enriching the soil. In permaculture, fallen wood is used to build hugelkultur mounds, beds that retain moisture and release nutrients slowly. The fungi work here too, helping to break down the wood over time, creating fertile conditions for years. The lesson is clear. To grow well, we must honour what has fallen. In this long, intimate relationship between fungi and fallen wood, there is no waste. There is no shame in collapse. A tree that falls is not a failure. It is a transformation waiting to happen. And the fungi, with their quiet presence, are there to receive it, to guide it, to make sure it continues. This teaches us something about life itself, that what falls may rise again, not in the same form, not as a mirror, but as nourishment, as foundation, as gift. The log becomes the log again and again, in new forms, in new functions. The tree becomes soil, the soil becomes roots, the roots become strength, the strength becomes shadow, and the shadow shelters new life. To walk through a forest and see these logs at every stage is to see time itself made visible. It is to understand that the forest is not a place of constant growth alone, but of constant renewal. That for everything alive and reaching, there is something else returning, softening, giving back. And fungi are the ones who hold this balance, not with noise or movement, but with consistency, with grace, with knowing. They are the ones who make sure the forest breathes in both directions, upward through the trees and downward through the logs that sleep. So the next time you pass a fallen trunk, remember, it is not just wood, it is future soil. It is a story still unfolding. It is the body of the forest resting, being remembered, being remade. Let us return once more to the fallen log, now years into its slow surrender. Its form is softer, rounded, no longer resembling the proud trunk it once was. The bark has peeled away, revealing the rich textures underneath, striations like forgotten script, grooves filled with moss, and pockets where life gathers in miniature worlds. This is no longer just wood. It is a living archive, telling the story of how death becomes life, and how fungi are the gentle authors of this transformation. Inside, the mycelium has spread wide and deep, forming delicate fans, fuzzy threads, tiny bridges between fibres. These filaments know the wood's history, where it cracked in winter, where rain lingered, where insects carved their homes. This fungal memory is not stored in cells like ours, but in the very way the network grows. It curves around hardness, blossoms into softness, thickens where food is found, and pulls back where dryness whispers caution. The wood and the fungi move together in a dialogue of presence and change. All around the log, the ecosystem has shifted. The soil beneath it is darker now, richer, alive with nutrients once locked in tree rings and leaves. Worms tunnel beneath it, turning the earth. Ferns anchor themselves at its base, their fronds catching light above. A sapling leans against it, its roots pressing through the softened heartwood. Each layer of the forest touches the log, above, beside, within, and each is changed by its slow disassembly. This is the quiet generosity of decay. It gives without recognition, without expectation. It nourishes in silence. And fungi are its agents, not just decomposing but designing, inviting life into every softened crevice. The log is not disappearing. It is becoming a hillock, a cradle, a bridge for ants, a drinking place for birds, a nursery for roots, an island of fertility in a sea of leaves. Even in its last phases, when the wood has almost dissolved into humus, the work of fungi continues. Spores released by distant relatives land in the soil and find this dark richness a welcome place to begin. New mycelium grows from this legacy. The old network fades, but not without leaving its signature. It has changed the structure of the soil. It has taught the nearby roots where to reach. It has left behind minerals, signals, even fragments of its own form. The next generation does not start from nothing. It begins in memory, and in that memory is resilience. Forests that hold fallen wood are healthier. They retain moisture longer, resist erosion better, and support more species. Trees that grow near old logs grow stronger. Mushrooms that fruit from rotting stumps spread spores that carry further. The fallen become the foundation, not just for plants, but for the entire rhythm of the ecosystem. They hold the past without clinging. They feed the present without fear. They make the future possible. Even the appearance of the fungi changes over time. Early on, fast-growing mold-like species bloom in bright colonies, white, yellow, orange. Then come the wood decay fungi, building structures like shelves and antlers, spreading fans and veils. And later still, the soil fungi arrive, less visible but no less vital, turning the last traces of wood into something that lives again. Each wave is a chapter. Each fruiting body is a whisper from below. We are still here. We are still making life. In ancient cultures, rotting logs were considered sacred. In Japan, they are used to cultivate shiitake mushrooms, grown slowly over seasons. In parts of North America, logs were carved with stories before being returned to the forest. In old European woodlands, fallen trees were never removed. They were understood as part of the land's breath, a rhythm of rising and falling, of standing and resting. And perhaps that's what fungi teach most clearly, that rest is not the absence of life, but a different shape of it, that slowing down, softening, breaking apart can be as creative as blooming. A tree does not stop mattering when it falls. It begins a different kind of giving. Fungi model this truth. Their networks work in darkness, without reward, without noise. They do not seek glory, they seek continuation. A kind of care that does not fade when something ends. Instead, it finds the hidden value and brings it forward. The fungi see the tree not for what it was, but for what it still is, a story unfolding. When we listen to the forest with enough patience, we begin to notice this rhythm. Not just the flash of life above ground, but the slow, essential hum below. The logs that sleep are not sleeping alone. They are held by fungi, remembered by soil, embraced by time, and we, too, are held. When we fall into grief, into prominence, into softness, the world does not forget us. Something invisible comes near, not to pull us up, but to cradle us where we are, to begin the work of gentle renewal, to turn sorrow into soil, memory into seed, loss into life. So let us walk softly through the woods. Let us step over logs, not with dismissal, but with reverence. Let us sit beside them and listen, not for words, but for stillness, for the slow voice of fungi turning yesterday into tomorrow, for the breath of a tree still echoing through the forest even after its last leaf has fallen. Because the wood that sleeps is not gone, it is dreaming, And in its dreams, something beautiful is always beginning. There is a kind of intelligence that doesn't speak. It doesn't think in words or pictures. It doesn't solve puzzles with hands or calculate with numbers. It moves slowly beneath the surface and spreading through soil, through wood, through leaf and root. It doesn't sleep or wake. It doesn't have a brain. And yet it remembers, it senses, it decides. This is the intelligence of fungi, not the kind that shines like lightning, but the kind that hums low and deep like the heartbeat of the earth. Fungi challenge what we think we know about thought. They don't have neurons, no central nervous system, no eyes to see, no ears to hear, no hands to touch. But they know when food is near. They know how to reach it. They know which paths are best, which directions are worth the effort, and which are dead ends. In experiments, they navigate mazes, connect points, even optimize routes better than some computers. Not by thinking as we do, but by being fully present in their bodies. Their body is their mind is their motion. A slime mold, technically not a fungus but a close cousin, has shown this beautifully. In a petri dish, it will stretch its tendrils toward multiple food sources, then retract the inefficient paths until only the best remain. It builds a network not randomly but with purpose, not with planning but with response. It adapts to what it learns, and what's more, it can remember where it has already been. If placed in the same maze again, it finds the food faster. No eyes, no thoughts, just a living map, drawn in motion. Mycelium, the true body of fungi, does something similar in the soil. It spreads outward in all directions, but not evenly. It thickens where nutrients are rich. It thins where space is scarce. It pauses when it senses toxins. It responds to the breath of roots, the presence of other fungi, the echoes of past encounters. And these responses are not simple reflexes. They are coordinated, calculated, shaped by feedback. The fungus is learning. And that learning is stored not in a brain, but in its shape, its chemistry, its growth. This kind of intelligence is not linear. It doesn't form clear chains of cause and effect. It is distributed. Every part of the network knows something. Every thread contributes to the whole. When one part is damaged, others adjust. When conditions change, the network reshapes itself. This is resilience born from unity, not control, but cooperation. Not hierarchy, but harmony. And perhaps that is the most remarkable thing about fungal intelligence. It doesn't seek control, it seeks connection. Fungi form alliances with plants, with bacteria, with insects. They share nutrients, information, and space. Some fungi even mediate between species, helping one tree share resources with another, or guiding roots toward better soil. They don't think of themselves as separate. They act as part of a system. They behave as if survival is not about winning, but about weaving. We often associate intelligence with speed, with quick reactions, fast thinking, instant solutions. But fungi are slow. They take hours to make a single choice. They wait days to extend a new branch of hypha. They take weeks to fruit. And yet their decisions are just as refined, just as precise, perhaps even more so. Because in that slowness they pay attention. They absorb every signal. They let the world shape their response. When a fungus encounters a stone underground, it doesn't crash against it. It curves around it, feeling its edges, finding its own shape in response. This is not defeat. This is grace. When food runs low, the network contracts, focusing its energy. When water returns, it expands. When two fungi meet, they may fuse, forming a shared body. Or they may repel, competing for space. Each outcome is a choice based not on command but on condition. Some fungi even conduct electrical signals, tiny pulses that move through the hyphae like whispers. These pulses increase when the fungus is disturbed or when it encounters food. Some scientists believe these may be primitive forms of communication, a kind of violent language exchanged between threads. If true, this would mean fungi are not just sensing, they are expressing, not with words but with voltage, with rhythm, with life. In forests, this intelligence helps maintain balance. When one tree is sick, the fungi reduce its connections, preventing the spread of disease. When another is thriving, they strengthen the bond, channeling more nutrients. These actions are not directed from above. They arise from the network itself, from the give and take of millions of micro-decisions made in real time. It is a system without a center, a mind without a brain. This distributed intelligence is deeply humbling. It suggests that thought is not limited to the skull, that learning does not require language, that adaptation can happen in silence, and it invites us to rethink what it means to know, to be aware, to be alive. The fungus does not think about the future. It doesn't worry or plan. It moves as needed, responds as required, adjusts without fear. It is not anxious. It is not ambitious. It simply is, and in its being, it finds a kind of wisdom we have forgotten, a wisdom of presence, of patience, of connection without control. And perhaps, in this way, fungi dream. Not in images or stories, but in growth. In every new thread that reaches outward, in every pulse that answers a root's request, in every soft decision made in the dark. These are the dreams of a system awake to its surroundings, dreams that nourish, dreams that endure. So let us look again at the forest floor, not as a static layer, but as a thinking skin. Beneath our feet, intelligence flows, not in shouts but in sighs, not in sparks but in threads. A wisdom older than language, rooted in touch, carried in silence, remembered in form. Fungal dreams are not fiction. They are the quiet reality beneath the world we walk. Let's go deeper now into the quiet chambers where fungal thought lives without thinking. Picture a forest in early autumn. A chill has begun to settle into the ground. Leaves are curling inwards, and beneath it all the fungal networks are making decisions. Not the kind of decisions we make in our heads, but decisions of shape, of direction, of what to grow and where. Your feet stretch forward, pausing at intersections of root and rock. One path is rich with sugar but already crowded. Another is dry but unexplored. Which way do they go? They try both, test the limits, then pull back from one and deepen into the other. The choice is not spoken, but it is made. This kind of behavior, repeated millions of times across the lattice of mycelium, creates what scientists call emergent intelligence. Each action is small, almost meaningless alone, but together they create a system that learns, a body that feels, a presence that understands. The network is constantly adjusting, responding to signals in the soil, to moisture, to the proximity of other organisms. If a plant nearby sends out distress chemicals, perhaps from drought or disease, the fungus may withdraw, or it may lean in, offering water, minerals, support. Each response is guided by what the threads encounter, by what they learn. And learning in fungi is not abstract. It is structural. They remember not through thought, but through growth. A path once travelled is easier to travel again. A nutrient-rich direction becomes thickened with hyphae. A threat leaves a chemical marker that deters future expansion. It is like memory carved into the body, built into form. No single thread knows everything, but the network remembers. Scientists have tested this. In lab conditions, fungal networks exposed to patterns of reward or challenge will later respond to those same patterns with greater speed or efficiency. If placed in a maze with food at one end, they find it. If placed there again, they find it faster. This isn't thought in the traditional sense. It's spatial memory, embodied knowledge. The fungus doesn't think about what happened. It simply carries the trace of what worked. And when multiple fungi meet, even more intelligence unfolds. They can compete or cooperate depending on the context. Some fuse their hyphae, exchanging genetic material and forming chimeric networks, new organisms built from shared ancestry. Others stop growing when they sense the presence of an incompatible species. The decision depends on past contact, on current resources, on the chemistry of the soil. There are no commands, only responses, no plans, only presence. Some species even exhibit behaviors that resemble decision-making across time. In experiments, slime molds have been shown to anticipate periodic events. If exposed to regular cycles of temperature or light, they begin to respond in rhythm, contracting or expanding in anticipation, even if the signal is removed. This suggests a kind of internal clock, a biological memory. A fungus can't count, but it can feel time pass. It can prepare. Fungal networks are also sensitive to touch. When a root brushes against a hyphal thread, the thread sends a signal. This mechanical stimulation triggers a cascade, enzymes released, walls softened, connections built. The fungus reads its world by touching it. It explores the way water explores, a drop at a time following the cracks, the textures, the slope of possibility. In this slow sensing, fungi understand more than we realize. They can detect toxins, heavy metals, even changes in air composition. Some species have been found growing in radioactive environments, adapting to the unthinkable. Others partner with algae or bacteria, forming lichens, tiny ecosystems that cling to stone and survive in the most barren places on Earth. This too is intelligence, not in brilliance but in resilience. What fungi teach us is that thought need not be fast to be profound, that knowing doesn't have to be loud to be real. We live in a world obsessed with speed and performance. But fungi remind us that some of the most important decisions take time, that some of the most intelligent actions happen in silence, that waiting is not absence, it is listening. And in listening, fungi form relationships. A single mycelial network might connect dozens of plant species, allowing them to trade, to warn, to help. When one tree is wounded by insects, the others are alerted. When a seedling is struggling, the adults nearby may send sugars through the mycelium to support it. These actions are not random. They are specific, shaped by the network's structure, its memory, its needs. The fungi act not as individuals, but as stewards of a community. This stewardship is not passive. It is active, dynamic. Mycelium doesn't simply react. It initiates. It expands into barren soil, exploring. It wraps around seeds, offering partnership. It secretes acids that unlock minerals, not just for itself, but for the plants it joins. It builds relationships that shape entire ecosystems, and it does this without intention, but with purpose. To understand fungal intelligence, we must shift our perspective. We must let go of the idea that awareness is limited to brains, that thought lives only in language, that choices must be conscious. Fungi show us another way. They show us that to be alive is to be responsive, to be present, to be shaped by the world and in turn to shape it gently. Imagine a world built on that kind of knowing, a world that grows through listening, that changes through contact, that remembers not with fear but with form. This is the world beneath our feet, a world where intelligence is slow, soft, spread wide and deep like rain soaking into soil. The next time you walk through a forest, pause. Look at the moss-covered logs, the mushrooms pushing through the leaf litter, the subtle, silken mould on the underside of a damp branch. Know that you are surrounded by thought, not loud, not sharp, but vast. Thought that flows through threads, that bends with roots, that touches without holding. You are not alone in your awareness, the earth is thinking too. Let's follow this intelligence to its final unfolding, not as something separate from us, but as something we've always lived beside. For centuries we overlooked it, walked past mushrooms without thought, brushed off the soft fuzz of mould as nuisance. But fungi, in their quiet way, have been here, building the architecture of the earth, thinking without thought, dreaming without sleep. They do not compete for attention, they do not demand to be known. They simply do the work of connection, of decomposition, of quiet care, and in doing so they show us another kind of mind, one that doesn't need control to be wise. In some indigenous traditions, fungi are understood not just as organisms, but as teachers. Their ability to break down, to transform, to heal is seen as sacred. The way they move beneath the soil is not just biology, it is guidance. A lesson in how to live gently, to adapt, to support others without seeking dominance. These are the values of a networked life, not a ladder, but a web, not a scent, but entanglement. And what happens when we begin to see fungal intelligence not as a metaphor, but as a real living force? We start to notice the subtleties of our world again. We begin to understand that life isn't made of isolated minds and actions. It's a constant flow of influence, of exchange. The fungi do not act alone. They respond to trees, to soil microbes, to rainfall patterns, to the decay of animals and leaves. They are always in relationship. Their intelligence is not their own. It belongs to the system. This is why they thrive in complexity. In forests with many species, many layers, many voices, fungi do their best work. They learn more, connect more, balance more. When a forest is too simple, when it has only one type of tree, or when the soil is over-tilled, the fungi struggle. They cannot teach, cannot adapt, because the conversation has grown too quiet. Their brilliance needs diversity. Their knowing needs complexity, just like ours. We too are shaped by networks, family, language, memory, ecology, but we forget sometimes. We think our thoughts are our own, our paths self-made, yet every idea we carry has roots. Every emotion has context. Every choice is part of a wider system. What fungi remind us gently is that to be alive is to be interwoven. And the more we recognize our connections, the more clearly we understand ourselves. Consider psilocybin, the compound found in certain fungi that can alter human perception. Under its influence, many people report the same thing, a sense of connection to trees, to stars, to each other. A loosening of the self, a dissolving of boundaries. It is as if, just for a moment, the brain remembers what the fungi have always known, that we are not alone, that we are part of something vast and humming and kind, that intelligence does not have to be rigid, it can be fluid, it can be shared. This doesn't mean fungi are mystical in the way stories often portray them. They are real, tangible, measurable, but their reality is no less wondrous. Their intelligence may not give speeches or solve equations, but it keeps forests alive. It keeps soil fertile. It binds the past to the present, death to life, one species to another. That is a kind of brilliance, too, steady, humble, and absolutely essential. And this intelligence doesn't disappear when a fungus dies. Spores carry its knowledge forward. They drift and settle, and when they grow, they do so with the memory of their parents' pathways, the molecules it produced, the nutrients it sought, the species it partnered with. The thread continues, the web expands, the knowing deepens. Imagine a child planting a tree. Beneath that seedling, mycelium waits, not to take over, but to offer help, to cradle the roots as they stretch, to whisper what the soil knows, to respond to the plant's breath. That child may never see the fungi, but they are there, shaping the outcome, sharing the work of growth. That is the kind of intelligence fungi hold. Not one that asks to be noticed, but one that shows up anyway. And perhaps that's the lesson they leave us with. That we don't always need to be seen to be useful, that we don't always need to lead to make change. Sometimes the most powerful intelligence is the one that listens best, that grows toward what is needed, that holds everything together from below. So let us walk more softly, let us look for signs of fungal life not with fear or disgust, but with wonder. Let us see their networks in the roots of trees, in the bark of fallen logs, in the scent of damp soil after rain. Let us learn from their way of being, not to become fungi, but to remember the value of interdependence, of curiosity, of growing slowly. Because the mind of the mushroom, the memory in the mould, the patience in the mycelium, they are not fantasies. They are truths we've forgotten. Truths that live in the ground, waiting for us to listen. And when we do, when we finally stop and feel the quiet humming beneath our feet, we may find that the earth itself has been thinking all along. Not in language, not in logic, but in loops, in threads, in touch. This is fungal intelligence. A wisdom without ego, a mind without a face, a dream that lives in the dark and gives its light away. They do not wear coats or work in sterile labs. They have no beakers, no glass flasks, no hands to hold tools. And yet, fungi are among the oldest and most skilled chemists on Earth. Beneath the forest floor, in decaying wood, on damp walls and between leaf litter, they carry out experiments with every breath. Their chemistry is not performed in bursts or in shouts. It is done in stillness, in the dark, slowly and perfectly, molecule by molecule. They transform the world not with noise, but with patience. Fungi produce compounds no other organism can. They craft acids to break down rock, enzymes to soften cell walls, and powerful molecules to protect, heal, or dissolve. These substances are not made at random. They are shaped by need. When food is trapped inside the fibers of wood, fungi release cellulases. When they need to defend a space from bacteria, they release antibiotics. When they encounter metals in soil, they bind them safely, making them less toxic to plants. They do all of this without intention, but with extraordinary precision. One of the most famous gifts of fungal chemistry is penicillin. Discovered by accident on a forgotten petri dish, it changed human history. Penicillin was created by a mold, Penicillium notatum, to outcompete bacteria in its environment. The fungus didn't mean to save lives. It meant to protect its space. But in that small battle, it crafted a compound that would eventually cure infections, end epidemics, and open the door to modern medicine. And penicillin is only the beginning. Fungi have given us immunosuppressants like cyclosporin, which makes organ transplants possible. They've provided cholesterol-lowering drugs like lovastatin. They've offered anti-cancer agents, migraine treatments, antidepressants, and natural pesticides. Each of these began as a fungal solution to an ecological problem. Each one was perfected underground, in the body of a mushroom, in the mold on a tree, in the shadows. These chemicals are more than tools. They are language. Fungi speak through their molecules. When a fungus senses competition, it releases compounds that slow its rivals. When it senses opportunity, it produces attractants that invite insects, plants, or microbes. Some fungi even mimic hormones, sending messages that trick other organisms into behaving a certain way. These are not words but signals, not sentences but scents, tastes, touches. A conversation written in chemistry. And the conversation is ongoing. In soil, fungi communicate with bacteria, with roots, with nematodes and ants. They send sugars, receive minerals, negotiate exchanges. They build communities not with laws but with feedback. When a plant offers more carbon, the fungus responds with more phosphorus. When conditions change, the balance shifts. It is a marketplace of mutual benefit, a living economy of trade all held together by chemistry and need. Some fungi take their chemical gifts even further. The ones known as endophytes live inside plants, offering protection in exchange for shelter. They produce toxins that deter herbivores or antioxidants that help the plant survive drought. These compounds are not generic, they are tailored to the host. A grass may contain one set, a tree another. The fungus listens to the plant, reads its stress and adjusts. It becomes part of the plant's immune system, a pharmacist within the leaf. And when fungi feed, their chemistry turns hunger into transformation. They release enzymes into the world, digesting food outside their bodies, then absorbing the results. It is as if they eat by tasting the world, by unraveling it. A decaying leaf becomes sugar. A bone becomes calcium. A fallen log becomes a feast. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. Their digestion is methodical, designed not to consume quickly, but to extract gently. They take only what can be taken and return what must be returned. This makes them recyclers of the highest order. In forests, fungi break down dead matter into its elemental parts, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, iron, and make it available again. Without fungi, these nutrients would stay locked away, unusable. With them, life becomes circular. A tree falls, a fungus feeds, the soil is enriched, a new tree grows. This is not just chemistry, it is choreography. And fungi don't limit their work to the wild. They appear in our homes, our bodies, our food. Yeasts are fungi, and without them there would be no bread, no beer, no wine. In fermentation, yeasts consume sugars and release gases and alcohols. They change the texture of flour, the flavour of grapes, the structure of milk. They make soft things rise. They turn spoil into sustenance. They make transformation delicious. In traditional cultures, this fungal alchemy has long been understood. In Asia, koji mold is used to make soy sauce and miso. In Africa, wild yeasts ferment millet and maize. In Europe, molds ripen cheese, bloom on cured meats, create the tang in sourdough. These processes are old, guided not by exact measurements, but by time, by touch, by scent. They require listening to the fungi working with their rhythms, a partnership between species, written in flavour. And still, we are only beginning to understand what fungi can do. In labs around the world, scientists are studying their potential to break down plastics, clean oil-soluble spills, filter polluted water. Some fungi can digest polyurethane. Others can absorb heavy metals. One species was found growing in the irradiated ruins of Chernobyl, using radiation itself as a food source. Their chemistry is not limited by fear. It adapts to what exists. It offers solutions we would never imagine on our own. This is the quiet brilliance of fungi. They do not brag. They do not rush. They observe. They respond. They craft their molecules with care, always tuned to the world around them, and in doing so they heal what is broken, feed what is hungry, clean what is spoiled, restore what is lost. So the next time you pass a mushroom in the woods, Think of it not just as a fruiting body, but as a laboratory, a place where ancient knowledge is being applied, where molecules are being made that may one day save a life, where the future of medicine, agriculture, even environmental healing is being shaped, slowly, quietly beneath the leaves. Because fungi are not just organisms, they are processes, they are chemists, they are artists of the unseen. Let's drift deeper into the work of these quiet chemists, into the subtle laboratories woven through forest soil, rotting bark, and even inside our bodies. Fungi do not simply break things down, they build new worlds from what others have left behind. Their chemistry is not destructive, it is alchemical. It turns waste into wonder, death into nourishment, ruin into foundation. And it does so not with violence, but with balance. When a fungus finds a fallen log, it does not consume it all at once. It sends out enzymes like feelers, delicate, specific, tuned to the type of wood, the presence of moisture, the age of the material. These enzymes are not random. Each one targets a particular bond, a particular structure. Cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin, each broken in stages, each reduced with care. It is not unlike reading a story line by line, pausing to understand before continuing. This is digestion as dialogue, and the enzymes themselves are works of art. They are not simply chemical scissors, they are sculptors, precisely shaping how the log softens, how the nutrients are released, how the soil is rebuilt. Fungi know that too much too fast unbalances the world, so they go slowly. They pace their chemistry with the rhythm of decay, and through this rhythm they create stability where once there was only loss. Some fungi even specialize in partnership. Mycorrhizal fungi, the ones who live in and around plant roots, use their chemistry to unlock minerals that plants cannot reach. They dissolve iron, phosphorus, zinc, elements locked in stone, and make them accessible. They trade these minerals for sugars from the plant, but the trade is not fixed, it shifts. When a tree is young and hungry, the fungus gives more. When the tree matures, the balance changes. Their chemistry becomes a negotiation, a living agreement. In the oceans, marine fungi use their enzymes to digest plant detritus, helping regulate carbon flow in coastal ecosystems. In grasslands, fungi build strong bonds with perennial roots, shaping the flavour of the soil itself. In rainforests, where decay is swift and constant, fungal chemistry is tuned to humidity, temperature, the pulse of seasonal rain. These are not factories, these are living systems of adaptation. And fungi are not limited to partnering with plants. Some form intricate relationships with edible wormholes. Leafcutter ants, for example, do not eat the leaves they harvest. They bring them underground to feed a fungus. The ants cultivate this fungus carefully, feeding it, grooming it, removing pests. In return, the fungus produces swollen structures rich in nutrients, perfectly suited to feed the ant colony. This is not domestication, it is co-evolution, a society built on fungal chemistry. Even within our own bodies, fungi shape our lives. Our gut and skin harbour fungal species that help balance our microbiome. They compete with harmful microbes. They shape our immune responses. When things are in harmony, we don't notice. But when balance is lost through illness, antibiotics, or stress, fungal overgrowth can trigger problems. Their presence reminds us that health is not an individual state, but a symphony of interactions, many of them chemical, many of them unseen. And in agriculture, fungi are changing the way we grow. Scientists are developing biofertilizers made from fungal spores and extracts. These can improve soil structure, increase drought tolerance, and reduce the need for synthetic inputs. Some fungi suppress plant diseases by releasing compounds that block pathogens or outcompete them. Others help plants absorb water more efficiently or resist salinity. All of this happens underground, quietly, molecule by molecule, like whispered care. In waste management too, fungi are stepping forward. Certain species are able to degrade industrial dyes, petroleum products, and even plastics. Pleurotus ostreatus, the oyster mushroom, can break down diesel. Aspergillus tubangensis has shown potential to digest polyurethane. These are not superpowers, they are extensions of what fungi have always done, sensing what is available and applying the right chemistry to break it down, to make it usable, to make it disappear, because fungal chemistry is not loud. It does not announce itself. It arrives like morning mist, like the smell of damp soil, like the slow unravelling of a log beneath your feet. It happens over days, over seasons. It builds into a transformation that is total but quiet. And if you bend down, place your palm on the ground and breathe, you might begin to sense it, that something is happening beneath you. Not magic, not myth, but process, ancient, ongoing, deeply alive. The chemists are at work, not in white coats but in threads, not with fire but with time. Now let us follow these quiet chemists to the places where healing takes its deepest form, not just in forests or farms or laboratory flasks, but in the very fabric of how life is held together. Fungi are not only cleaners and decomposers, they are restorers. They find the broken, the unused, the forgotten, and with their chemistry they bring it back to usefulness. They do not ask if something is worthy. They do not wait for recognition. They sense imbalance and begin to balance. They sense damage and begin to soften it. This is their way. In places of environmental ruin, fungi are often the first to respond. Where soil is laced with heavy metals, where oil has blackened rivers, where plastics have settled into the roots of things, fungi begin their work. They do not remove the problem like a hand scooping water. Instead, they invite it in, they bind it, transform it, restructure it. Toxic becomes neutral, dead becomes fertile. This is called mycorremediation, the use of fungi to repair damaged ecosystems. And though the term is modern, the practice is ancient. Fungi have been doing this since life began to die. They are not alone in this healing. Their chemical gifts ripple outward. A mycelial network that neutralizes toxins improves the life of nearby plants. Stronger plants attract insects. Insects bring birds. Birds drop seeds. And slowly the place begins again. Not because anyone forced it to, but because the conditions were made right. Fungi do not heal by fixing, they heal by allowing, by preparing, by welcoming what comes. And they do this not just in soil and water, but in the human heart. In recent years, science has begun to study psychoactive fungi, those that produce psilocybin, a compound that can shift consciousness. Long feared or misunderstood, these mushrooms are now being seen for what they may be, tools of emotional healing. In clinical studies, psilocybin has helped people with depression, anxiety, and addiction, PTSD, not by numbing pain, but by opening space for it. People describe feelings of connection, of clarity, of peace, not because the fungi erase the wound, but because they invite it to be seen. They help people feel what has been waiting beneath the noise. They bring light into places we have buried. And how do they do it? Through chemistry. Psilocybin, once metabolized into psilocin, interacts with serotonin receptors in the brain, particularly those related to mood, perception, and cognition. It disrupts default patterns of thought. It softens the walls of habit and fear. It allows something new to emerge, not always easily, but often truthfully. And in that shift, many people find relief not just from symptoms, but from separation. They remember they are part of something larger, that they are not alone, that life, even in its brokenness, still holds them. This is not a cure-all. It is not a miracle. It is once again a slow chemistry, a thoughtful invitation. Fungal healing asks not for speed, but for surrender. Not for escape, but for re-entry. And in the right setting, with care, it can be profound. Beyond medicine, fungal chemistry is beginning to shape how we think about the materials we use. Scientists growing fungal leather. Flexible and strong, made not from animals, but from mycelial mats. It looks and feels like hide, but it is compostable, renewable, made with almost no water or waste. Buildings are being made from mycelium bricks, light yet insulating, grown from agricultural waste. Packaging that once took centuries to degrade is being replaced by fungal forms that disappear into the earth in weeks. This is not the future, it is happening now. And again, it comes from fungal intelligence. They know how to bind particles, how to weave fibers, how to grow in the shape of what surrounds them. We don't have to teach them to do this. We only have to ask gently, provide the right conditions, and let them show us how they already know. Even art has found a partner in fungi. Some artists now grow their canvases, letting fungi bloom in patterns, sculpt shapes, even paint in living colour. Others use fungal dyes, rich and natural, to stain cloth and paper. Some record the electrical signals of fungi and translate them into music, slow pulses and rhythms made audible. This is not appropriation, it is collaboration. It is an honouring of fungal creativity, expressed through form, through growth, through rhythm. And if fungi can heal the earth, the body, the mind, and the imagination, what else might they offer? What else have they already given that we've forgotten to see? Perhaps they've given us a model of how to live, not by conquering, but by weaving, not by owning, but by offering. A model where chemistry is not a weapon, but a gesture of care, where transformation is not feared, but welcomed, where the old is not discarded, but broken down and reformed. They teach us that to heal is not to return to what was. It is to become something new, richer, softer, more connected. They teach us that healing is slow, that it happens in the dark, beneath the surface, long before the bloom is visible. And they teach us that everything is usable, even the fallen, even the unwanted, even the broken. So when you see a mushroom growing from decay, don't think of it as an end. Think of it as a beginning, a bloom of chemistry, of care, of change, a signal that something unseen has been working quietly, patiently to bring life back into balance. The fungi are healing the world, one molecule at a time, and they ask for nothing in return, only that we stop, notice, and allow ourselves to be changed.